Elizabeth I is one of the most famous queens in history, but do we know much about her personality? From a very young age, Elizabeth became very proficient at disguising and hiding her emotions, effectively wearing a mask to order her survival. And although Elizabeth famously said lots of things, we have her speeches, we have her letters, poems and prayers, we don't actually know what she was thinking and feeling. Even Elizabeth's contemporaries at her court didn't actually know what she was thinking all of the time. In 1566, the Spanish ambassador wrote about this. He said that she is so nimble in her dealing and threads in and out of this business, the business of her marriage, in such a way that her most intimate favourites fail to understand her, and her intentions are therefore variously interpreted. We know that when it came to marriage, this was a question that she was not willing to give an answer to until she was ready, and of course in the end she never did marry. This was a trait seen from her early childhood and of course is no doubt rooted in the trauma that she experienced by the execution or murder of her mother, and knowing from a very early age that she was a bastard child and that her position in life was incredibly precarious. As a child, it was impossible for Elizabeth to feel safe. Everyone around her wanted to manipulate her, use her or discard her. And so in order to survive, she realised that keeping her mouth shut was the best way to go. When it came to Henry VIII, her father, Elizabeth both feared and respected him. She also knew that out of the royal children, her position was the lowest. As a 12-year-old girl, she pledged her loyalty to her father, saying, "I am bound unto you as Lord by the law of royal authority, as Lord and Father by the law of nature, and as greatest Lord and matchless and most benevolent Father by the divine law." She knew how to keep powerful people close to her. And as a young girl and then a teenager, she knew that as a bastard child, her position was far from certain. She needed to keep her stepmother's close as well as her royal siblings, particularly her brother, the future Edward VI. And then following her father's death, she was again the subject of manipulation from Thomas Seymour, who became the husband of Henry VIII's final and sixth wife, Catherine Parr. Although Thomas Seymour was already married, he was looking at Elizabeth as a potential spouse so that he could become even more powerful. This put the young 14-year-old Elizabeth in a terribly dangerous situation because it was akin to treason to try and marry without the king's permission. The king at this point was her younger brother. She wrote and she said this, "It is, as your majesty is not unaware, rather characteristic of my nature, not to say in words as much as I think in my mind." So already she was displaying this talent of masking her emotions and masking what she was thinking, and this definitely saved her. This composure probably saved her life in this instance because Thomas Seymour was sent to the block and executed, but Elizabeth, despite interrogation, denied any association or any intentions to marry Thomas Seymour, and so she was allowed to return to her life. In fact, she was interrogated during this time to see to what extent she was involved in these plans to become Thomas Seymour's wife. This is after the death of Catherine Parr, by the way. And one of her interrogators, so she was not tortured, but one of her interrogators said, "She has a very good wit, and nothing is gotten off her but by great policy," meaning that she gave nothing away unless she was asked very specific questions to which she had to answer in truth. And then later, when her half-sister Mary became Mary I, the Catholic queen, later known as Bloody Mary, Elizabeth again was interrogated. She was actually put in the Tower of London because it was thought that she was plotting to overthrow Mary to put herself on the throne. She was actually suspected of treason, and of course she was interrogated again, but once more she maintained her composure and was released. But this pressure did obviously get to her. She didn't express it through her words or expressions, but she had physical troubles. She particularly had great trouble sleeping, and no wonder. The amount of anxiety and pressure on her must have been terrible indeed. Her life hung in the balance on more than one occasion. And so, of course, when Elizabeth eventually became queen, she continued to use these tactics. She continued to wear that mask in order to rule her country. It turned out to be a very good tactic because it allowed her to rule without being seen as emotional and weak, and it allowed her to manipulate those people around her in order to survive as queen for the length of time that she did.